Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Gruver. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Kathy Gruver.
And I'm Jason Mefford. And today we thought we would talk about something that we hear from lots of people. In fact, sometimes we all get in this situation as well. But have you ever told yourself, I will be happy when? Right? So I know, a lot of us say those things. I've said that to myself at different points in my life as well, right? Whatever current situation you happen to be in, you think, when I get that new job, when I make $100,000 a year, when I have that new relationship, then I will be happy. Have you ever said that to yourself?
Oh, yeah, all the time. But here's what's so funny about that, right? If that was true, if those external things really made us happy, we would still have our very first toy and we would never want for anything else. Right? Because every year at Christmas, what do? We sat down. This is for us old
Oh my
folks.
gosh, I got my new toy. I'm so happy.
No,
I'm never going to need anything else again in my life.
Right. Or if, I just want to go to Disneyland or whatever it is, you wave your little arms but that does not satisfy us, right? We need then the next thing to make us happy. And, I have friends and clients and family members who have traveled, moved around the world trying to find that happiness. They think if it's a different city or if it's a different relationship or if it's a different job, happiness, I believe, comes from inside us. Happiness is a choice. And if you're constantly waiting for that next external thing to, quote, make you happy, or your partner to make you happy, it's never going to happen. You have to find a way to choose that for yourself. So we thought that would be an interesting conversation today.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I agree with you that the happiness is from the inside. It has nothing to do with your external circumstances except for your perception of those circumstances that you're in. But happiness really is something that's internal. And yes, you might experience what you think are short-term happy bumps, if you will. I don't know if
Sure.
That's a term, right? You get the new toy, you get the new car, you move to the new place. Well, there's going to be a little bit of a honeymoon period, right? Where obviously things are different. There's been some change, so you're going to feel a little bit differently. You might be kind of happy, if you want to call it, with the situation that you're in. But as soon as something changes, right, if you're not happy from the inside, then that doesn't last for very long, right? And that's why, like you said, you've had friends that have literally moved all over the world. I'm sure that they, oh gosh, when I moved to Japan, so they moved to Japan, and oh my gosh, Japan is beautiful, it's wonderful, and it's a wonderful place, right? But after a couple months, and they're probably like, man, there's a lot of people here, and there's going to be something that isn't going to quite meet the expectations. And so then they're like, well, hey, let's move to Thailand. I don't know, right? So they move to Thailand, wherever it happens to be, right? And for a month or two, maybe they experience that same thing, but you can see how it starts coming into a cycle. Because when some new circumstance, when some new situation presents itself, that's not what you want.
Yep.
All of a sudden, we're like the little toddler and we start stomping our feet and saying, you gave me the wrong toy for Christmas. I knew that's not the one I wanted. Right.
And then this year's catalog comes.
My toddler impersonation.
That was really good. This year's catalog comes, but then it's the next shiny thing, right? I mean, it's the next better thing, the next different thing. It's people who are, serial monogamists. I was one of those myself. It's like, oh, I'd kind of let that run, and I'd go to the next one, and then I'd kind of let that run, and I'd go to the next one. It's like, what do you want is the biggest question, and how can you create happiness no matter what the external circumstance? And I think that's the huge question, right? If the world is shitting on you, what do you do to find joy, pleasure, contentment, happiness in that situation? And, I had COVID a couple weeks ago, and a friend of mine said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You got to cancel all your clients. And I said, well, I've got all this time to get my taxes done now. And she goes, oh, okay, well, good for you for finding the joy in this or whatever she said. But it was like, I can't change it. I can't go in the office and see clients. I got COVID. I can see my Zoom people. So that was great. But it's like, I didn't feel bad. I just happened to have the thing, right? So I found a way to make that into a couple productive days to do stuff that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. It's like, what is the silver lining in this issue? And I think so often we want to just wallow in that crapness, right? And I have a friend who, the job is wrong and she's single, she doesn't have enough money and her apartment is terrible and everything's bad all the time and she's miserable. And I at one point kind of called her on it and I said, you're waiting for happiness with all these external things, like, all you're doing is complaining about this external world. What about internal? And she goes, you don't understand, my roommate sucks. And I'm like, okay, I don't understand, and we've all been there. I teach this stuff and I still have moments where, I had ants in the kitchen this morning and it's like, motherfuck, it's like,
why today of all days? Now I'm going to be late. Well, and I think, as you're talking there, it brings up kind of, two things, because obviously, as you're listening to this, we want you to get ideas, to get some information so you can start doing things different. So if you find yourself in that situation, you can get yourself out, right? If you don't have a friend like Kathy who's going to call you out on your shit, you got to call yourself out on your shit and you got to get out, right? Or you're going to just sit there and wallow.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is again, there's always a silver lining if you're looking for it, right? So that's one thing that you can do is, like Kathy said, oh my gosh, I got sick again with the big old C and that really sucks, but now I have time to do my taxes, right? Because again, there's always going to be a silver lining. So start asking yourself some questions, try to see what some of the silver lining might be, right? The other thing is kind of your perception around the things that are here, right? Again, I mean, the example that you gave, my apartment, sucks, my roommate's a dick, blah, 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 whatever, right? Well, you're not really grateful at that point either, right? So being more grateful for some of the stuff starts to take some of that away as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you know what, your apartment might not be exactly what you want, but you got a roof over your head,
right?
A lot of people are homeless, right? Especially this post-COVID, there are a lot more homeless people, right? I mean, you can see it here in LA. Hey, at least if you have an apartment, right? It might not be the apartment that you want, but at least you got an apartment, right? You got a place to sleep. It might not be the food that you want to eat, but at least you've got food, right? You've probably got clean drinking water, right? 1 billion people in the world don't have clean drinking water or have to walk a mile to go get it, right? So, if you can even stop just for a few minutes as you're bitching and moaning and start to realize or remember all the little things that you do have to be grateful for, that's going to move your attention away from the woe is me pity party.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Oh, it's about reframing. I mean, totally. It's about reframing. And I completely agree with you. And when I was having this conversation with a friend about, the apartment sucks and she doesn't have a job and just on and on and on about this negative stuff, as we were leaving the restaurant we were at, there was a caregiver and a younger man in one of those, like, you have to live in it wheelchair kind of things. And he was complete paraplegic, completely slumped over, couldn't look up, couldn't move anything. And I was thinking, boy, I bet he wishes he had your shitty life. And it's like, I don't know this guy's reality. Maybe he is the most joy-filled person in the world, but to just look at him and make that assessment of, oh my God, he cannot get out of that chair. I bet he wishes he had your shitty life, And so what I've recommended to people is start a gratitude journal. Just get a blank book, get a notebook, get, something, and have one big session where you sit down, you write down everything you're grateful for. I have limbs that work. I have feet that walk. I have, drinking water. I have heat. I have light. I have, medication if I need it. I have tea. I've got wine. I've got a great partner. Whatever it is, write it all in this book. And as you think of more, add to it. And then on a day where you're like, everything sucks and this is stupid, pick up the book and look back at the things that you are grateful for. Look back at those things that we forget when we are overtaken by that negative monster and everything seems like crap. You know, do bad things happen? Absolutely. Not to diminish anybody's suffering. And how much of that suffering is self-imposed because of what's happening up here, right? Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional.
Yep.
I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh that said that. I don't remember, Dalai Lama. But it's like we create our reality with our thoughts. So that you can always change.
Well, and I think that's a great idea to have that gratitude journal, because if you're at those times when you're having a really hard time,
Yep.
sometimes it's hard to kick yourself in the ass, right? But if you have something that's already there, then all you have to do is read instead of trying to think about it. And like you said, I mean, I'm sure if you sat down and you read that for a minute or two, just take a minute or two and read that, you're going to totally shift where you're at, right? And I think another kind of reframe too that's kind of similar but maybe a little bit different is how we talked about, there's always going to be a silver lining.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things that there's duality and polarity in life, right? In order to create something new, you have to destroy or get rid of something else, right? And I think, I know for me especially, that has sometimes been hard, because a lot of times these things that we consider to be challenges or hard is part of that destruction process.
Yep.
Right. And so you can think of it, maybe in two little analogies for you, right? If I want to remodel my house, if I want to add a new room to it, if I want to put in new kitchen cabinets, right? I have to go in and actually tear apart and destroy a part of my house. Now, in the short term, it's going to kind of suck, because if you've ever lived in a house that's being remodeled, you got dust everywhere, you got workers coming in, you got noise going on. I mean, our neighbors were redoing their back pool and patio and everything. And so for six fucking months, I was hearing jackhammers and everything else. Now, I
remember that because we were trying to record and you're like, can you hear that?
Right. I didn't get to benefit from it, but they do now, but they had to put up with those months, right? It's the same thing. If your glass is full of water, you can't add any more water until you let some of the water go.
Yep.
Right? And so we've talked about that before too, that sometimes we have to let go before we can get. And a lot of the times when we think the woe is me, my life is shit, you're going through one of those rebuilding phases, right?
Yeah.
So if you can look at it that way and realize, every time I've gone through pain and heartache and trial and suffering, I come out on the other side better.
Absolutely.
I always come out on the other side better. And so I just have to remind myself of that and be grateful for the opportunity to go through whatever that thing is, because I know it's also going to be short term.
Yeah.
Right. None of these things usually last for your whole life. It's all short term. Can you put up with something for a month or 3 months or 6 months, knowing that at the end of 6 months it's going to be better? Yeah.
Yeah.
I can. Because I've done it a lot in my life, right?
Yes. Well, you just said so many things. It's triggered so many things in me, and of course I forgot like 6 of them because I'm at that age now. We sometimes forget there's possibility, right? We lose something, and we don't take into account that the next thing that comes might actually be better. And I actually did a daily pause on that the other day. I have birds in my backyard, right? I feed the birds, and I was walking down the pathway to our little back unit, and there were so many birds. And I remembered that my first apartment in Hollywood had a back deck with this tree, and I put a bird feeder up. And I would sit out there and I'd listen to the tweeting and the chirping, and I got so much joy out of feeding those birds. And when I had to leave that apartment, I was devastated that I had to leave these birds, not those specific birds, but just like birds, and I was so sad. And the next place I moved didn't even have a balcony, didn't have any outdoor space. So I was like so bummed about these birds, never considering that the future held something better, that the future held something different. and that there was this possibility that something would be better in the future or different in the future. And now I actually have a yard with a bird bath and birds, and the jay, the jay sits on my hand and takes peanuts. And I never considered that as a possibility when I was younger, right? So that was just one thing that popped in. The other thing is there's something called cognitive restructuring, which is a great psychological tool. I use it with my coaching clients, where you look at that triggering thought and you look at the distortions that go along with it. And so often it's the black and white thinking, or the always and never, the I should have done that differently, and we should all over ourselves all the time. So a tool like cognitive restructuring, and there's a great book from David Burns, I think it's called The Feeling Good Handbook, who goes really in depth about cognitive restructuring. And like I said, I work with that with coaching clients, psychologists use it all the time. So there's tools out there to help you start to reframe and to shift your thinking. And if you can find one little good thing out of what's happening to you, and sometimes it's tough because it does seem like crap. I have a condo up in Paso Robles that almost burned to the ground. Unit fire right next to mine, and my tenant had to move out. And I thought I was going to have to pay for everything because my insurance wasn't enough. And I was faced with like probably an $80,000 bill, which I don't have. And I wasn't getting any rent. And all this stuff just sort of happened in the middle of me having COVID the first time I had it. And I said to somebody, well, I'm going to have a big tax break this year. And I'm going to get a lot of miles on my credit card because I just gave this guy $5,000 to start getting all the wet carpet out. So, and I looked at these two positive things. Tax break, got a big, got miles on my credit card for paying for this. And my ex-husband goes, wow, look at you reframing that to something positive. And I said, I have to, or I'd lose my mind. And it's like, and now end of that story, it turned out to be one of the greatest things ever of, I got a brand new tenant in who's incredible. The whole place has been remodeled and insurance ended up covering it. So, I mean, it's like, it ended up being a gift of this, what seemingly horrible thing happened, right? And we can always, like you said, always look back and see the great thing that happened. When you're in it, it seems like crap. But if you could just take one step back and reframe and look to the positive, it changes everything.
Well, and so if we take that example, right? I mean, when the fire happened, obviously your tenant moved out. I mean, how long of a time frame are we talking about? It was several months.
It's been 6 months.
So months.
that happened in August, and as we're recording this, we're mid-February. So literally, my new tenant moved in on February 5th.
Yep.
And so for 6 months, I didn't have rent, which, not the good thing that came out of that, but the lesson that came out of that was I still managed to make all of my bills, even though I wasn't getting that income from the tenant. I was still paying the property taxes, still paying the mortgage, still paying all this, plus all my bills here in Santa Barbara. I managed to see that as a lesson of, oh my God, like I can do this. Like I didn't end up, bankrupt living on the street. I could do this. It was tight, but I could do it. And that gave me such a great, boost of holy shit, girl, like you handled this and you handled it well. Not to say there weren't moments of, oh my God, but those are fleeting moments, just the same way everything's a fleeting moment, right? And if you rely on these external sources for happiness, I can guarantee you that external source is going to go away. The car's going to get scratched. The new guy's not going to seem as great. The food's going to be eaten as shit. The food, it's fleeting. These moments are fleeting. So you have to find that happiness in you. That's the only thing that's constant.
Well, and to me, I think what was great about that example that you shared with the apartment too is, you chose to reframe, to find at least one thing that was positive about it, to create that cognitive reframe, right? And by doing that, you saved yourself 6 months of grief, right? Now, again, the whole 6 months wasn't like bliss,
right?
But you could have started going down a rabbit hole at that point. And you could have been in a funk for 6 months, right? But finding that one thing that you could reframe gave you some hope too, right?
Yep.
And whether, again, looking back at times when you've gotten through things like this before and things have worked out all right.
Yep.
Whether it's finding that one little thing to reframe it, whether it's stopping and sitting down and reading your gratitude journal or thinking of a few things that you're grateful for, any of those little things, and again, they're not hard, they don't cost you money, they only take a few minutes of your time, but by doing that, it also gives you hope.
Yep.
Right? And if you can keep hope alive, you can get through anything, right?
Yep.
You can get through anything if you keep hope alive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you got to do, because guess what? We're on a roller coaster of life. There's ups, there's downs, there's flats, right? And so we've just got to have hope as we're going through those downs, because guess what? The reason you have to go down is so you can go up on a roller coaster, right? Think about any big roller coasters that you've gone on. The first part of the journey is this up, 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 and then you crest, and holy shit, you go fast, but you're doing that so you can make it through the rest of the ride.
Yeah. I love roller coasters so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I've been listening to Eckhart Tolle again because it's just he just is so inspiring to me. And he was talking about suffering. And he said, you know, I didn't have a picture perfect childhood. It wasn't horrible. Other people had worse childhoods than me. He said, but there was definitely suffering there. He said, we have all met with some sort of suffering. He said, and if you're sitting out there in the audience and you're starting to get angry that I'm not acknowledging your level of suffering, that I'm not, your suffering was so bad and I'm minimizing your suffering. He's like, but we all had it. You know, he's basically kind of like, get over yourself, because we all can point to some sort of suffering that we had. None of us are going to escape this world without suffering. What we do with that and how we frame that in our minds, if we get secondary gain or we get rewarded or we start to identify with that suffering and we want to stay miserable, which I think a lot of people very unconsciously want to do, that's a huge problem. Because talk about just making your own life miserable. You know, and you're right. That's what reminded me. I could have sat here for 6 months and been miserable every day about what happened to my condo. Could have absolutely have done that. It felt terrible. Why would I want to do that? That's like hitting yourself with a frying pan. It's like, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts. Well, then stop fucking hitting yourself. And we do this to ourselves all the time. I will give you 5 minutes to play woe is me and 5 minutes to bitch and whine about how bad your life is, and then find a way to see something positive in what's happening around you.
Yeah. Well, because, and again, it's not to tell people not to feel the emotion and not to push through it.
Yeah.
But a lot of these things, it doesn't take months, right, to get through these things. Literally, as you get better at it, you can push through some of these emotions and have them behind you in 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and so why keep hitting yourself with the fry pan for months when you can get through it, find a way to reframe it, find a way to be grateful, find a way to look for the silver lining, or see the hope in what is going to, the possibilities that are going to come that are going to be better. And move through, right? We're not telling you to totally ignore it and push it down, but get through it quicker and find any way that you can to have that hope.
Yeah. And I know, I can hear it. There's somebody listening to this going, but you don't understand. But you don't understand. I'm in pain all the time. But you don't understand. I just got diagnosed with cancer. But you don't understand. My husband left. But you don't understand. I understand. I mean, I really do. You know, both of us, both Jason and I have suffered. You lost a brother young. I lost my mom young. We've both had pain. We've both had shitty moments where there was definitely suffering. I totally understand that. And there's got to be a way to reframe that. And I have a friend I know from dance class. Her Instagram handle is "Cancer saved my life." You know, and I have
what
so
a
many
reframe.
and I have so many clients and friends who have had a serious chronic illness, and it was the biggest gift for them. And maybe it took them years to get to that point where they could embrace that as a gift and realize cancer saved their life. You can do it too, because I see people doing it all the time. You can do it. You have the strength, a little glimmer of strength in you somewhere to make that a different thought.
Yep. Yeah, because everyone suffers. We just go through different things, but your thing is your thing. My thing is my thing. But what we've talked about and the techniques or tips to get through it are true regardless of what thing you're going through.
Yep.
Like you said, I've never had cancer, but my mom died of cancer, and I've known a lot of people who have gone through cancer. So I've experienced cancer in my life, right? I've experienced death, I've experienced divorce, I've experienced bankruptcy, financial problems, getting fired. I mean, you'd be surprised, but people could throw something at me. I've either experienced it or I know someone close to me that has experienced it. So, that's one where we got to call you out on your shit. And I know you might not want to hear that. You might not be at a place right now, but everybody has gone through what somebody has gone through what you're going through. And there are people who have chosen to see the positive and to get out of it. There's going to be plenty of people as well who didn't, who let it spiral down, who got to a point where they just couldn't handle things anymore. You just have to choose which of those people do you want to be. There's examples of people who have taken both paths. But which path do you choose? That's up to you. Yeah.
It's all in your brain. So reframing things, shifting your perception, starting a gratitude journal, and finding the silver lining in these things. And it might take you a little bit. It might take some processing to figure that out, but I know you can do it. So yay. All right, everybody. Go out and have a great day. After all that, go have a great day.
Find the silver lining. Find the silver lining.
Make it a great day.
Yeah.
It's up to you. All right. I'm Kathy Gruver. I can be reached at kathygruver.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go out and we'll see you on the next episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. See ya.